Hear me now? Can you hear me now? Thank you so much. Is this Paulo? Hey, John. Thank you so much. You're wonderful. I'm gonna go on mute again.
Elizabeth Bennett Parker
has joined the meeting. Morning, everybody. The Operations Board meeting will begin shortly. We're experiencing a temporary delay. We ask that everybody please stand by.
Dan Stork.
Has joined the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. This is Vice Chair Bennett Parker. Thank you all for your patience with our delay. We're going to go ahead and get this meeting started, so I'll call the meeting to order. We are obviously meeting virtually. I think everyone attending has been with us through this process before, but if anyone needs any reminders, please let us know now. You should be able to raise your hand in the participant box if you have a question or want to speak on a meeting item. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Alcorn,
Yes, here.
present. Banks,
Present.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Dan Stork,
Has left the meeting.
Here.
Ms. Bonke, Ms. Crystal,
Here.
Ms. Franklin,
Here.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Ms. Lawson,
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Here.
Ms. Shelton,
Here. Here.
Mr. Stork, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Here. This is Ralph Smith. I'm here. I did not hear my name called.
Is here. And we have, Madam Chairman, we have a quorum.
Also, this is Meg Bomke from Stafford County. I am here, but my name was not called that I could hear.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bomke.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next action item is 3A, Resolution 3-09-2020, finding a need to conduct the September 18th, 2020 meeting electronically. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The VRE Operations Board finds that meeting by electronic means is
Dan
authorized.
Stork,
Has joined the meeting.
Makes it both impractical and unsafe for the operations board to assemble in a single location. Are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the operations board's lawful duties and the items on today's agenda are encompassed within the continuity of operations ordinances adopted by several member localities of the VRE to ensure continued operation during the disaster posed by the public health emergency resulting from COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Madam Vice Chair, this is Kitty Crystal. Move approval.
Second, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Ms. Crystal, seconded by Ms. Bailey. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I do believe we're supposed to do a roll call vote, so I will call on Madam Clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Bomke.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Franklin.
Aye.
Ms. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin. Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Stork. Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Chairwoman, that resolution passes.
Thank you. The next item is our agenda. You see that on the screen before you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move, Supervisor Bailey.
Second, Ralph Smith.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Supervisor Bailey, seconded by Mr. Smith. Is there any further discussion? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey. Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bob,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
I think the one thing that
Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Chairwoman, the motion passes.
Thank you. The next item is our approval of the minutes of our June meeting. First, are there any corrections or just, well, I guess, okay, first, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Katie Crystal. Move approval.
Second, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Ms. Crystal, seconded by Ms. Bailey. Is there any further discussion or any corrections? As a reminder, you can raise your hand in the participant chat. Do not see any. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn,
Yeah, I'm abstaining. I was not at that meeting.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
I wasn't at the meeting.
Ms. Bennett, Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Abstain, was not at the meeting.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
This is Meg Bomke. Maybe my name was called, but I didn't hear it. I too abstain. I was not in attendance.
Ms. Bennett Parker, can you vote, please?
Yes, I also, sorry, didn't hear my name, but yes, I vote aye.
Okay. And Madam Chairwoman, that motion passes.
Thank you. So thank you all for coming to the September 2020 VRE Operations Board meeting. I think this is a exciting meeting, and that it's our first meeting officially with Mr. Dalton as our CEO. Obviously, you all are aware PRTC and NBTC approved his hiring at their meetings earlier this month. So we're excited to work with Mr. Dalton moving forward. I do want to remind you all that the Legislative Committee will meet after this meeting is concluded, and all board members are welcome to participate. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Dalton for his CEO report.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I too am excited. I'm excited to help shepherd the next phase or the next period in VRE's very illustrious legacy. So thank you for those kind words, and thank you for the support from the entire operations board as we went through this process together. So with that, let me just jump into my report. First of all, again, just good morning, everybody. And I hope all operations board members and everybody that's listening, that you and your families continue to remain safe and healthy. The week of September 21st, VRE will participate in the nationwide recognition of Rail Safety Week. This is an annual effort spearheaded by Operation Lifesaver International to stop track tragedies. In years past, VRE would work with local law enforcement agencies and sponsor grade crossing blitzes where VRE, CSX, Norfolk Southern, Keolis, and Amtrak and others would distribute rail safety literature directly to motorists and, if applicable, pedestrians in the area. Due to the pandemic, Rail Safety Week will, in most parts of the country, be a virtual event. In addition to the communications messaging through social media and other platforms, and of course in partnership with CSX, Norfolk Southern, and Operation Lifesaver, we are installing temporary electronic message boards at several of the grade crossings in our service area. The boards will convey messages targeted at motorists and pedestrians, reminding them to just simply stay off the tracks. We have also developed messages for our conductors to share with passengers throughout the course of next week. And again, this is an annual event for us. We're excited to participate both regionally and with our other partners and stakeholders. And then as ridership returns, the continued emphasis on enhanced cleaning processes, social distancing, the wearing of face coverings, and hand hygiene remains key. We still observe a strong daily compliance of passengers wearing face coverings onboard VRE trains and at our stations. VRE staff continue to work primarily from remote work environments, and we continue to maintain a continuity of operations. We continue to operate at a reduced service level, which essentially is our S schedule plus. As most of you recall, on July 27th, we added one round trip train on the Fredericksburg line. As we continue to take a more measured approach to returning service to normal levels, and again, that measured approach is as our ridership returns, we either can add cars and lengthen our trains or simply just add additional round trip trains to stay slightly ahead of demand, and again, with the emphasis on managing social distancing. Our overall ridership continues to be down compared to the same period last year and of course, pre-COVID levels. Since phase 3 opening, we have seen an increase in ridership on a week-to-week basis. Average daily ridership rose above 1,000 for the first time since mid-March, when the national health emergency occurred. And as you can see in the graph that's presented to you, that continues to slowly tick up. And as I've said to others, that we are gaining ridership one rider at a time, but at least the trend is heading positive. On-time performance has been strong and well above the levels we experienced the same period last year. For the month of July, our system-wide on-time performance was 94%, compared to 61% 1 year ago. For the month of August, our system-wide on-time performance was 91%, compared to 79% 1 year ago. And just as a reminder, we implemented a seasonal schedule for the summer that went into effect on May 26th, and that ended on September 8th. And although not an apples to apples comparison, since we are currently operating at a reduced level of service, we did see a positive correlation of the seasonal schedule and the daily performance of our trains. An added feature of my report, and likely part of our weekly CEO update, is a project spotlight. This is this edition is intended to just provide some periodic updates on various projects that may not be front and center in our agenda or our board package. And some of these projects, of course, are in various stages, whether that be conceptual, preliminary engineering, final design, and of course, you'll see later on in the agenda some projects that we are seeking authorization to move those into construction. So we thought this would be a nice added feature just to periodically come back and highlight some projects. So for this report, I want to highlight Potomac Shores and a couple other topics. VRE has been, as it relates to Potomac Shores, VRE has been coordinating closely with CSX, the developer, and their consultants for the design of the station facility. The developer and their consultant anticipate delivery of plans at about the 90% level by the end of next month. VRE is currently working with our legal counsel and other to execute construction agreements between VRE and the developer, as well as construction agreements between VRE and CSX. Provided that both agreements and a host of other elements of this project are essentially completed on or about the end of the year, end of this calendar year, or the beginning of or early 2021. This project could be ready for construction spring of 2021. And then, of course, there's somewhere in the range of a 18 to 24 month construction cycle. The next, I just wanted to touch on the Long Bridge. The final environmental impact statement, record of decision, was published in August. This is one of the many attributes which essentially is a significant milestone that makes a Long Bridge project eligible for additional federal funding or federal financing opportunities, again, amongst a myriad of other things. And I just want to, as a stakeholder, or as VRE as a stakeholder in this project, just want to thank DRPT, both Jennifer Mitchell, Mike McLaughlin, and their teams for their tireless efforts for reaching this major milestone. And then just finally, we continue to work with DRPT staff on project sequencing and agreements for access and funding for the related elements of the Transforming Rail in Virginia. We do anticipate bringing those agreements to the operations board as early as next month for recommendation to the commissions.
Okay, Ms. Bailey has a question.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dalton, music to my ears at Potomac Shores. Thank you so much for the update on that. And I had a meeting just last night with the developer and the chair of the CEA down there. They will be excited to hear this news. And so as I recall, this may be early projections. Am I incorrect about that, or are these early projections?
Thank you, Supervisor Bailey. Specifically, early projections on...
In terms of moving the project forward?
Well, again, where the team is working towards is to be in a position where construction could be let again as early as the spring of 2021. So yes, that might be some early projections. And then of course I just tacked on, a normal construction cycle for that would be about 18 to 24 months after that. Yes, early in the sense that, of course, we need to get to the end of the calendar year or towards the end of the calendar year, maybe the beginning of next calendar year, for all these multitude of elements to come together to be a little bit more definitive on what that construction schedule will look like. And just like our other projects, that's the key milestone, is when you let for a construction contract and that contractor comes back with that schedule that the firm can perform to. That's really where where we would embed a more solid schedule. More importantly, a completion date. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, 100%. But again, I thank you for just your report on this, just to give us an update. I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Mr. Dalton?
Yes.
This is Supervisor Franklin. Quick question, just along those lines. I know we don't have a completion date and we have a projected completion date. Do we know when it will be operational, roughly?
We don't know for certain, and I'll just revert back to partly what I said. Once we get at a point where the construction can be let, which tentatively looks like, it could be as early as spring of 2021, then that schedule, that construction schedule, will be, I'll just say, a little more hard coded, and of course,
I'll send you a flyer.
I put a peaking here of 18 to 24 months, so you could be looking at as early as summer of 22 to the end of 22, possibly, maybe even extending into the beginning of 23. But again, the team will know that more definitively once the construction contract is let.
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate also the work that you all done. It'll be great once that comes back, when we can actually have a good time frame for when we can get people on the train and actually commuting. So if we can, as soon as we can get that type of projection, that'll be helpful. But thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're just as excited. We've just like everybody in the region, we've been talking about this for quite a while, and any time that we can get into that construction mode, it gets it provides an element of realness, if you will, for said project. So yeah, we're excited as well. And thank you both, Supervisor Bailey and Supervisor Franklin.
Mr. Dalton and Vice Chairman Bennett Parker, this is Meg Bomke. I had a question about the ridership. Is now a good time to ask that question?
Yeah, this is Rick. Absolutely.
So my question is, as we see our ridership continue to go up, and remember when, Rich, when you took us on a tour, me and Cindy Shelton, which was awesome, you talked about some of the polling that you had done with riders, if I remember correctly. And I was just wondering, have you all considered, or maybe you've already done this, have you polled the riders, the 95,000 riders that we used to have, to find out what their plans are as far as teleworking, what their plans are with their employer? Are they going to 100% telework? Are they going to go to kind of I'll call it a hybrid model, so that we can make financial changes that we need to make in that? Have you all thought about doing that or already done it?
So let me just say this. There has been regional efforts as it relates to surveying not only riders or people that commute via not just specifically VRE, but just transit in general. In addition to that, there has been surveys conducted with employers. And we as VRE have participated in those surveys as well. I will just say nothing definitive. What we're looking at is some of the feedback that we've received in terms of timing. Okay, so we had received information, and we're plugged into again a lot of the regional discussions about workers returning in general. And of course, that's helped us at least plan in the short term. but what we're seeing is, you know, a lot of the uncertainty, of course, hinges off of, you know, when a vaccine's available, and of course the distribution of a vaccine, and, you know, ultimately that specific date, if you will, when we are post-COVID. So with all of that, what we're seeing is some employers are bringing folks back, albeit maybe not at the pace at which it may have been predicted a couple of months ago. And those are the same folks that are telling us that, you know, in terms of generally return of ridership or the return of their workers and stuff may not even be back at full strength, you know, what would be the end of our fiscal year next year, right? So that's one element or one source of information. As far as I'll just call it the permanence piece, if you will, of teleworking, there's some surveys and some work that has been done, again, by others in the region that may suggest that, you know, some employer, you know, teleworking could increase with employers subsequently, you know, impacting public transit plus, you know, including VRE by, you know, an additional 15% or so compared to what we experience now from a teleworking standpoint. But as, you know, frankly, as far as what we've analyzed and what we're seeing is it's more about, you know, having some level of those discussions, and the certainty of it is still somewhat out, you know, in the air. And I will say that when we get into action item 9A, which is we're presenting our preliminary budget to you, we will get into a little bit more detail on sort of our view of the world as it relates to the budget and what we're anticipating, again, based on information we have today.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Dalton? Okay.
Okay, here now we're just going to proceed on, and of course Robert will continue to watch the hand raise function. So if anybody has any questions or anything like that, we'll try to stop, and Robert will recognize you, and again answer any questions that you have. So with that, another thing I just wanted to point out to you that recently we added a train utilization page to our website to aid passengers in determining which trains to ride based on current capacity levels. This may be a little difficult to read. Of course, it is available on our website. We have received some very positive feedback, and we'll continue to provide this information to our passengers. And essentially what this does is we identify what the pre-COVID total capacity of a given train would be by the number of seats. And of course, because we are managing social distancing on board our trains, there is a reduced number of seats available. And then we are updating at least what the current ridership shows on a given train. So if a rider wants to, you know, again, if they would prefer to take a train that is not as crowded, even though we will manage, you know, to the max capacity allowed under our social distancing management plan, just for ease of mind, our riders can look at this, and it may, you know, it likely adds to their choice in which train to take. So I just want to bring your attention that we've recently added that. And of course, this is similar to other tools that other transit providers in the region are doing for their passengers as well. In support of our initiative to welcome back riders, a component of our communications and messaging campaigns are several videos of varying lengths that we've developed over the last couple of months. So I just want to show you one. It's 30 seconds in length. And
our priority at VRE is keeping you safe. To prepare for your return, we've enhanced our cleaning protocols, disinfecting before the morning and afternoon services. Social distancing is easier with online planning tools and signage on our platforms and trains. We have added crew temperature checks, a face covering requirement, reduced touch points, and available sanitizer to our detailed program. When you're ready, we'll be here to welcome you back safely. Our priority at
So again, that's just an example of some of the work that we're doing that over the last couple of months to stand up some more visual depictions of what we're doing, and more from the substance side. You know, the enhanced cleaning of rail equipment, managing social distancing both on the platform or the station platforms and on board our trains. And I just wanted to give you, I know we've pushed some of this information out even in our weekly CEO updates, but just wanted to highlight one of those. Again, we want to emphasize the commitment to the health and safety of our passengers and staff as our riders return. You're likely to see and hear even more of these videos and other messaging distributed on several platforms over the course of the next couple of months. Again, want to thank our staff, our onboard train crews, transportation managers, the facilities and mechanical operation teams, and others for their efforts towards executing and maintaining these additional health measures. And then just finally, I just want to thank our loyal riders for sticking with us, and every day we look forward to your return. That is the end of my report. Madam Vice Chair, I'll take any additional questions at this point if anybody has them.
Mr. Dalton, as a reminder, if you have a question or a comment, you can raise your hand by clicking the hand next to your name in the participant list, and staff will let me know if anyone has their hands raised.
Ms. Bennett Parker and Mr. Dalton.
Thank you. The next item is public comment. Public comments for this meeting are being taken electronically. Members of the public need to visit VRE.org for the link to the public comment form. The link will remain open throughout the meeting, and the clerk will read all public comments at the end of the meeting. Our next item is action item 9A, referral of the preliminary FY 2022 VRE operating and capital budget to the Commission. And VRE CFO Mark Schofield will have a presentation, and we'd appreciate if everyone could hold their questions until after he's concluded that presentation. Mr. Dalton, will you please introduce the item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. This is a referral of the preliminary FY 2022 VRE operating and capital budget to the commissions. And we're just simply seeking authorization, to present or to submit to the commissions for their consideration, so the commissions in turn can refer to the jurisdictions for review. And just in quick summary before we get to the presentation, VRE's preliminary FY 2022 operating budget totals about $91.9 million. As a quick comparison, the approved FY 2021 budget was $91.4 million. VRE's preliminary FY 2022 capital budget includes commitments of $101.8 million from federal, state, regional, and local funding sources towards the capital improvement program. And as potentially referred to in the presentation and further discussion is the CIP. A final FY 2022 budget, including an amended FY 2021 budget, will be submitted in December for the Operations Board consideration and referral to the commissions for final approval. So Mark, as Vice Chair mentioned, Mark Schofield, our Chief Financial Officer for VRE, will present the following. We'll look at the current financial position, key operating budget assumptions, use of CARES Act funding, capital improvement program, or again referred to as the CIP, and then what the next steps are. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss to Mark Schofield at this time, and he'll run through essentially what has been outlined on this slide as well. So, Mr. Schofield, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich, and good morning, Madam Chair and board members. We'll jump right into it. So first, a quick recap of how we ended 2020. With the collapse of ridership in April, May, and June, we ended up losing approximately $9 million worth of projected passenger revenue. But due to our strong position coming into the pandemic, plus our targeted spending reductions, we were able to end the year just under $1 million in the black prior to the application of any emergency state or federal funding. So near the beginning of the pandemic, the state did provide approximately $1.1 million in emergency operating assistance. And then the CARES Act was passed, which allocated $86 million to VRE. We have been working under the FTA's guidance. We have calculated that we will be eligible for approximately $2.7 million of CARES Act money just for Q4 of 2020. We expect to draw those funds down later in the fall. So now as we've moved into FY21, as Rich told you, ridership has remained at low levels in the range of 1,300 to 1,400 riders per day during the midweek. This has translated into about $1.5 million of passenger revenue over the first 2 months, over July and August. And that projects out to about $10 million total over the entire 12 months of the fiscal year if our current trends continue. Our total P&L just for the month of July was minus $4.7 million, so in the red. But that does include our entire annual insurance expense, which was $2.5 million above the budget. That was a topic that we raised with the board back in July. So we do not expect this level of a deficit that we had in July to be repeated each month. However, we do expect by the end of the year to be able to draw approximately $33 million of CARES Act reimbursement in order to backfill our revenues and our deficits. I will talk a little bit more about how the CARES Act works and how it impacts our budgeting discussions in just a couple minutes. So now on to the 2022 budget. And I want to stress that this is a preliminary budget and the numbers may change and likely will change, both from a technical perspective in terms of how we review our expense and revenue projections, and potentially from a more of a policy perspective, depending on the guidance that you as the board provide to us. As Rich indicated, our preliminary 2022 operating budget is $91.9 million. That includes $85.7 million for the daily maintenance and the operations of the trains, as compared to $85.1 million in the approved 2021 budget, and $6.2 million for debt service on the rail cars, which is the same amount as this year. Although we are currently running that modified S schedule, which we do assume a return to the full schedule of 32 daily trains by 2022. Well before the ridership returns all the way to any sort of pre-pandemic levels, this level of service will be necessary in order to make sure that riders have convenient travel times and also to continue to provide the adequate social distancing if that remains necessary. As we discussed in July, under our existing policy direction, the starting point for a quote unquote normal 2022 would be a 3% increase in the passenger fares. However, given the challenges, obviously, that both riders and the jurisdictions are looking at, the preliminary budget includes these three key assumptions. One, no change to passenger fares. We believe that raising passenger fares in the current environment is unlikely to have much of a positive impact on revenue, while potentially generating negative publicity and rider response. But at the same time, we don't believe that lowering passenger fares would achieve a positive outcome either. The primary factors driving our current low ridership are the perceptions of safety, the ability to work at home rather than at the office, and readily available parking and low gas prices for those people who do have to be at the office. Right now, the level of the fare is not the deciding factor, particularly given the availability of the transit benefit. So we believe that lowering fares would be unlikely to drive any significant new ridership and would only increase our reliance on the CARES Act. Number two, our total jurisdictional contribution for 2022 is currently in the budget at $18.3 million, the same amount as 2021. And then third, and this was an issue that we discussed with the committee in July, the allocation of that subsidy, or the amount that each jurisdiction has to pay for 2022, is also not changed as compared to 2021. So that each jurisdiction would contribute the same amount as they are contributing this year. As we discussed with the committee, we usually do a master agreement survey in early October, which determines the allocation of the subsidy for the upcoming year. Not only would the administration of that survey be difficult in the current environment, but it also would be unlikely to produce reliable results. So the committee recommended to us, rather than performing the survey, to simply reuse the FY21 percentages on the subsidy. I will tell you that the FTA has taken a similar approach in using prior year data for the allocation of its programs this year. So, as I mentioned, we are assuming for the rest of this year, for the rest of 2021, that passenger revenue will stay roughly in its current range, which would result in a total annual revenue of approximately $10 million, or a little less than 25% of pre-pandemic revenue. You may have seen an article in the Washington Post earlier this week about a survey that the Greater Washington Partnership did, indicating that most employers do not expect to have the majority of their folks back in the office until the summer of next year at the earliest. And so we believe that that projection is in line with those kind of results from the surveys. I will note passenger revenue, as compared to ridership, revenue has been kind of sticky. When ridership dropped very quickly in March, revenue dropped, of course, too, but not quite as much. Ridership was down more than 95%. Revenue was only down about 80%. And again, riders have continued to purchase tickets while riding very infrequently or not at all. And so if you look at our numbers right now, the average fare, the amount that each person is paying on average per trip, is kind of abnormally high right now. So I would expect over the course of this coming year that stickiness will continue in the other direction, so that as riders return, some of them will already have been buying monthly tickets but not riding on them very often, so that won't show up as an increase in revenue. Or even as some riders just come back to the trains, other riders will finally be canceling their tickets that they aren't using. So again, as ridership comes back, I do expect revenue then to lag a little bit, just doing the opposite of what it did at the beginning of the pandemic. So then for FY22, we're budgeting right now our preliminary passenger revenue at approximately $18 million, or about 40% of the pre-pandemic revenue number. I will admit that this is right now just functioning as a kind of a placeholder while we continue to watch how the pandemic evolves. That would sort of represent starting in the summer of next year, having sort of a slow, steady increase over the course of the year, but still not coming anywhere close to the pre-pandemic level. Obviously, if a vaccine is widely available, if offices and schools are able to totally reopen, then we certainly would hope that the revenues would be higher than that. But we believe, given where we are in the budget process now, that that's an appropriate place to begin. I want to emphasize, and this goes, I think, to the comment that Ms. Baumke made. We're going to have to wait and see a little bit what passenger behavior actually looks like in this new normal. And our top line ridership is not necessarily going to tell the whole story. You can envision one outcome where a large number of our riders decide to telework part-time, but still ride VRE part-time. And you can envision another scenario where a smaller group of riders decides they don't have to go into the office now at all. They entirely telework and they don't ride VRE. Those two scenarios could result in the same, average daily ridership, but would have a very different impact on us in terms of the P&L based on what kind of ticket purchasing they would be doing. So again, we are just going to have to watch and see how the employers are responding, how employees are responding, and really how the whole telework change plays out. So then just to hit these last points very quickly, the Commonwealth has been working very hard to respond to the pandemic and to assist transit agencies, and they have been prioritizing the operating assistance both last year and this year. It looks like in FY21 we will receive roughly the same amount that we did in FY20, which is very good. Our budget is conservatively projecting a slightly reduced amount in FY22, just in response to what we project will be reduced tax collections. But again, over the course of this budget process, we'll be working with DRPT to refine that projection. The Commonwealth has also committed to maintaining that 84% reimbursement rate on our track access fees. Those of you who have been around for a while know how critical that is to our long-term sustainability. And so we appreciate that from DRPT. And then, of course, as we noted back in July, all the discretionary expenses in the operating budget, whether it's consulting, professional services, replacement of equipment and furniture, new initiatives, all those things are still being reviewed to be potentially deferred or eliminated in order to reduce expenses and to extend the availability of the CARES Act money. So we do expect that $91.9 million top line number will come down further. So if I were in your seat and knowing the uncertainty that we are looking at, one of the main questions I would have is, okay, how long is this CARES Act money going to last? As we said in July, obviously nothing lasts forever, but the CARES Act should carry us through what I would call the public health portion of the pandemic, so that then we can assess whether and how the commuting patterns have changed without having to make any rash decisions. We cannot control the development of the vaccine. We cannot control the decisions that the employers make about telework, but we can make decisions in our budget to help us stretch that CARES Act money. And that's what I would hope that you can take away from this discussion. We often describe the CARES Act as backfilling our lost revenues, but it doesn't exactly work that way. We can't simply present a piece of paper to FTA that says, hey, we lost $9 million in passenger revenues in Q4. Can we please have $9 million? We have to tally up the eligible expenses that we had. We have to net out the passenger revenues that we received. We have to net out any subsidies that we received. And then that residual amount that isn't covered is what the CARES Act can pay for. So, every dollar of expense that we are able to save is a dollar of CARES Act money that we can use in the future. Every dollar of passenger fares that we get, every dollar of jurisdictional contribution that we get, that stretches that CARES Act money longer into the future. So what we've tried to do here is to build this budget with the goal of not making any drastic changes or cuts to the service to stretch that CARES Act money out beyond FY22 into 23 and potentially beyond, and of really trying to equitably split that burden of providing VRE between the passengers, the jurisdictions, and the CARES Act. So now switching off of the operating budget and into the capital program, the CIP. Similar to last year, but even more so. After a number of years of speaking and securing a very substantial amount of discretionary grant money, our capital program is now laser focused on project delivery, which you absolutely will hear about later in the agenda today. In addition, the state's Transforming Rail in Virginia program has impacted a number of our projects, particularly our planned station expansions on the Fredericksburg line. We are still working through some of those changes and what they mean in the CIP. And so we will be discussing that with the committee and with the operations board in more detail a little bit later in the budget process. I do want to note again, we are continuing and Rich also noted this, we are continuing our discussions with DRPT about a contribution to the Long Bridge and the broader rail transformation program using the CROC. These discussions continue to contemplate a combination of a debt issuance backed by the CROC as well as pay-as-you-go cash. This process is occurring sort of in parallel with, but independently from the budget adoption process. We don't, in budgets past, we have made specific recommendations to the operations board about what projects ought to get the CROC money. We don't expect to make any specific recommendations like that quite yet until we are able to sort of conclude the negotiations with DRPT and bring that back to you all for review and discussion. And so at this point, just to highlight again what the next steps are quickly, we will continue to review and modify and update the budget throughout October and November. As the current fiscal year progresses and as we have more information about the pandemic and the overall conditions in the region, we will be reviewing the budget again with the committee, with the jurisdictional staff, and with the entire board in October and November. And then again, we look to bring the final budget back to be approved in December and referred to the commissions for their action in January. And with that, I would turn it back to Rich and to Madam Chair, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schofield. I will give my colleagues some time to raise their hands by asking you a question myself first. I know our jurisdictions are required, at least currently, to spend our CARES Act dollars by the end of the year, and I'm wondering if we have any requirements as to when we're expected or need to spend the CARES Act dollars.
That's a very good question. Thank you. And yes, we have heard that about with regard to the jurisdictions. No, we do not have a requirement to spend it by the end of the year or even by any specific date yet. So the plan to stretch those dollars out into the upcoming years, I think is a wide one, given that we don't have a deadline.
Okay, thank you. Can staff tell me who has raised their hands?
Yes, Ms. Bennett Parker, we do have a question from Mr. Alcorn first.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Excellent presentation. Just for context, yesterday evening, I was on the NVTC WMATA committee call, and the CARES Act money for WMATA is going to be done December, January timeframe. So WMATA's looking at the cliff in FY22. So the fact that the CARES Act funding here can be extended into FY22 and beyond is excellent news. So thank you very much for putting that together, and thank you to our federal partners for that. I did just, as a related question, I was a little bit, I didn't really fully understand that until the presentation by looking at the FY22 sources and uses in our package. And I just wanted to make sure that because there it wasn't clear to me if we weren't moving capital funds into operating funds, which I know is a big no-no. Just wanted to clarify that that is not the case, that we are still using capital funds appropriately and are not shifting those to take care of our operating needs in FY22. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question that we have is from Mr. McLaughlin.
Hi, it's more of a statement than a question. Both Rich and Mark mentioned Transformer Rail in Virginia, and Mark mentioned Longbridge. I do want to note that we had a huge milestone Longbridge a couple weeks ago. The final EIS and record decision from the FRA has been approved and finalized. So, and Rich had a quote in the press release that included the governor, the mayor of DC, Secretary Valentine, many other FRA, many other folks. So that was a big milestone in getting the EIS done. And we actually have a procurement out for Longbridge to take it to 30% design. We're in the midst of that now. We're working through the vendors now. So just want to note that the projects do continue to move forward, as Rich mentioned, and we are working closely with Rich and Mark and Dallas and others on Rich's team to continue to move everything forward. Thank you.
Okay, the next comment or question we have is from Ms. Lawson.
Good morning. I'm based on what Mike just said, I'm assuming that there haven't been any threats of transforming rail budget cuts in the special session. Don't know if our lobbyist is on this call, but can somebody touch on that and assure us that that's not a possibility?
I was giving a pause to see if anyone else wanted to answer, but yes, to your point, to what I was saying about Longbridge and other projects moving forward, we have received the permission from the Secretary of Transportation to continue to move forward with various funding, and for the most part, we are in either planning or preliminary engineering for a lot of projects, and we'll soon be putting out furthering engineering, which is not inexpensive for a project of this size. So we have received that permission from the Secretary's office, who got it from the Governor's office to continue to move forward with procurements like the Longbridge design. It was more up to because the way the funding works and the omnibus from the legislature in Virginia really doles it out to DRPT and a future agency is going to come online, Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. We don't really need permission from the legislature. It's really from the administrative side and the governor's office and the Secretary of Transportation. But yes, those projects are still moving forward. We have sufficient budget. Now, if things change in the future, we'll let folks know. But at the current time, we're moving forward with the projects.
Okay, we have no further hands raised at this time.
I'm sorry, this is Supervisor Bailey. I do have my hand raised in the chat box.
Ms. Bailey.
Okay.
Thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt. And this may be something that you've covered already in your budget projections, but I wanted to know, there are corporations and organizations that buy passes in advance, and I don't know how that process is, but can that impact our budget as well? And have you accounted for that, or is that a concern?
I would say that's not really too much of a concern.
Okay.
Really. Again, this is sort of uncharted waters a little bit for us, trying to understand passenger ticket buying behavior. But no, I don't think buying tickets, yes, people will, for example, buy Amtrak step-up tickets, buy more than they need, keep them in their wallet or in their, on their mobile app, and then use them over the course of a year, say. But that's relatively minor. So no, I'm not terribly concerned about that aspect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the last comment, last hand you have raised.
Thank you. Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9A?
So move, Supervisor Bailey.
Supervisor Alcorn, second.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Mr. Alcorn. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey.
Aye.
Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Baumke.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Franklin.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Stark. I didn't catch that. Mr. Watkins.
Aye.
Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Our next item is action item 9B, approval of increases to the CEO procurement authorization and contract award authorities. Mr. Dalton, will you give us an overview of this item?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're recommending the Operations Board, or we're asking the Operation Board to approve increases to 2 delegations of authorities to the CEO, one of which being contract award authority to $200,000 and procurement authorization authority up to $1 million. In summary, the current CEO authority for contract awards is the maximum limit is $100,000, and same for procurements is $100,000 without requiring approval from the Operations Board. These proposed increases were presented to the VRE Finance Committee on July 17th for consideration. I just want to recap the key points that were in support of the changes, and they include staff analyzed both contract awards and procurement authorizations during a 24-month period between calendar year 2018 and calendar year 2019. For contract awards, staff reported 14 contract awards that came before the Operations Board with a value between $100,000 and $200,000. Of those awards, only 3 were for new contracts, while the other 11 were task orders under existing contracts for which the board had previously approved award of the contract amendments to the existing contracts, or purchase orders or extensions of existing leases. Another point is, during the 2020 session, the Virginia General Assembly enacted legislation that raises the state small purchase limit to $200,000, which exempts such purchases from some of the competitive procurement requirements in the Virginia Public Procurement Act. For the procurement authorizations in that $200,000 to $1 million range, staff reported these were primarily items such as procurement for LED light fixtures, pavement repairs and striping, website management services. We noted forklift trucks and other similar items. These procurement authorizations are almost always placed on the consent agenda and are not discussed by the Operations Board. And again, those are requests for authorization to do the solicitation. Than $1 million, that would still require 2 approvals by the Operations Board, both for the solicitation and the award. Even under these proposed changes, that would still be the case. And of course, for example, final design for the Broad Run expansion projects, new passenger rail cars, delivery of diesel fuel for locomotives, and construction of the Quantico Station improvements as one of the examples. That's my overview and summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Are there questions for Mr. Dalton on this item?
Madam Vice Chair, this is Supervisor Alcorn with a question.
Mr. Alcorn.
Thank you. I may have missed it, but is in the package, I guess there was some discussion of communication of at least some of these items as information items to the operations board. Is that going forward, or was that dropped?
Thank you for the question. Let me just clarify that. As you're familiar with, and we'll get to it towards the end of this package, I believe it's item 10A, there's a spending authority report. And from the previous change in delegation of authority, that spending authority report was created, and we report, and on a monthly basis, we report any of those categories that are above $50,000 to $100,000. We would enhance that spending authority report to include these other, these other elements of spending or authorization for both procurements and contract awards. So you will see an expanded report moving forward if this action item is authorized by the operations board.
Okay, thanks, Rich. And I'm trying to think, these would be information items after the fact, correct? None of these would be, we wouldn't see this as information items before you executed anything. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
You have asked your question or provided comment, lower your hand, but the next question or comment we have is.
I'm so sorry, but I couldn't hear that at all. I don't know if I'm next in line with the question. This is Katie Crystal.
Yes, Ms. Crystal.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Dalton and Ms. Bennett Parker, I just wanted to provide a brief comment on behalf of the Finance Committee, which is to say that we did hear this item at our July committee meeting and do support this as well, I think for the reasons that Mr. Dalton has shared. And also just to emphasize too, for some of these projects, particularly ones regarding stations or other capital investments, we actually see these 3 times. We see them in our capital improvement plan during the procurement authorization, and then again at the time of award. So we felt like this was a reasonable way to keep things flexible in between board meetings, maybe reduce the length of board meetings for these things that really just end up on the consent agenda, and still keep the operations board well informed through the process of voting on the procurement, through the information items as was just described, and again through a robust review of our capital improvement plan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Crystal, for those comments. Staff, does anyone else have their hands raised?
Yes, and just as a reminder, please hand in the WebEx session. The next question we have is from Mr. Kelly.
No, not so much a question, but a request. I get a little antsy with $1 million of authority as elected officials. I would ask Rich if you could at least give us a heads up before the procurement saying I'm planning to do this. So there's some notification on the direction we're going. No, we have never had an issue on VRE, but I keep thinking what happened with Metro and kind of the fact that the board gave up a lot of oversight and found themselves in a huge mess. And that's kind of my thinking on this. So on a procurement of $1 million, I would like to have at least some notification before it goes forward. Just so if I have any questions I can ask. I'm not asking you to give me a whole blown, this is why, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, hey, we're looking at this, maybe a few lines on why. And if anybody has any questions, I can at least have the opportunity to chime in. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Vice Chair, this is absolutely. We have different methods that we reach out and communicate with the entire board, but yeah, I'll come up with something and make sure you have the information that makes you feel comfortable with us moving forward with those procurements.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for that suggestion. Do we have anyone else with their hands raised?
At this point, we have no other hands raised.
Thank you.
Madam
Is there
Chair,
a
this is Supervisor Lawson.
Ms. Lawson.
I just wanted to echo what Mr. Kelly just said, and also thank Katie Crystal, because I had a little she must have telepathy going on this morning, because I did want to hear from the Finance Committee. So Katie, thank you for that. And I echo the request that Matt asked.
Thanks, Janine.
Got it. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9B?
So move, Supervisor Bailey.
This is Supervisor Shelton. I'll second.
Thank you. I heard a motion by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Ms. Lawson. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Madam Vice Chair, this is Supervisor Alcorn.
Mr. Alcorn.
I would just ask that the discussion that was just had with Mr. Kelly be reflected in the procedures. I don't need to see that in writing, but I thought that was an important point, and I would want to make sure that that is considered part of the ongoing process going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. Ms. Sorry, I'm trying to remember who made the motion. Ms. Bailey and Ms. Lawson, I think, are you supportive of that? I think it's been on the record. I think it's probably part of the process at this point, but want to make sure that you are comfortable perhaps with a friendly amendment to make that part of the recommendation as well.
I agree. This is Supervisor Bailey.
Madam Chair, this is Lawson, and I believe it was Supervisor Shelton that gave the second, not me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Ms.
And
Shelton
I
and Ms.
agree.
Bailey.
I agree.
Okay. Okay. If there's hearing no further discussion, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn?
Yes, aye.
Aye.
Mr. Banks?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Bomke?
Aye.
Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
Ms. Franklin?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith? Mr. Stork?
Aye. Smith, aye.
Mr. Waukesha?
Stork, aye. Stork, aye.
Waukesha, aye.
Thank you. I got you, Mr. Schwartz. And Madam Vice Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item is action item 9C, authorization to execute a contract for construction of the life cycle overhaul and upgrade facility. Mr. Dalton, will you please give us an overview of this item?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're seeking authorization to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with Clark Construction Group, LLC of Bethesda, Maryland, for the construction of the life cycle overhaul and upgrade facility in the amount stated in the resolution, plus the contingency for a total amount not to exceed $41,440,307. Just in summary, this is a key project for us to facilitate the continued implementation of our life cycle maintenance strategy for VRE rolling stock. This facility will be constructed at our Crossroads Maintenance and Storage Facility in Spotsylvania County, and this will allow VRE to perform major overhaul and upgrades and enhance our existing preventive maintenance process, all of which to ensure that our rolling stock equipment continues to be maintained at the highest level of reliability, and of course, a major component of that is safety. So that is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised in the chat box or participant box?
We do not have any hands raised.
Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9C?
This is Crystal. Move approval.
Second, Supervisor Bailey.
Then a motion by Ms. Crystal, seconded by Ms. Bailey. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Baumke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item is action item number 9D, authorization to execute a contract for safety and security consulting services. Mr. Dalton?
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're seeking authorization from the Operations Board to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with ADS System Safety Consulting, LLC of Baltimore, Maryland, for the provision of safety and security consulting services for one base year and 4 option years for a total amount not to exceed $2,500,000 for the entire 5-year term, with the CEO exercising the option years at his discretion. The safety and security consulting services contract is a task order contract, and it may include assisting staff with safety and security policy analysis, managing regulatory compliance, and providing enhancements to safety training programs. Consistent with other task order contracts, approval by the VRE Operations Board is required prior to the award of each task order in excess of the CEO's delegated spending authority. That's my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any hands raised.
Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9D?
This is Supervisor Shelton. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Ms. Shelton, seconded by Ms. Bailey. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett,
Aye.
Ms. Baumke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. The next item is action item number 9E, authorization to execute a contract for construction of Quantico Station improvements. Mr. Dalton will give an overview of this item.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're seeking authorization to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with Archer Western Construction, LLC of Hearn, Virginia, for the construction of the Quantico Station improvements in the amount stated in the resolution, plus a contingency for a total amount not to exceed $18,380,263. As most of you know, this project has been something that we've been working on in collaboration with primarily DRPT, but more broadly with all of the stakeholders involved: Marine Corps Base Quantico, the town of Quantico, CSX, the Federal Railroad Administration, and simply put, this project will extend the existing platform, construct a new center platform, and overhead pedestrian bridges. And another element is to aid in the completion of the 11-mile third track project that's also known as Arkandale to Powell's Creek. That is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have any hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Kelly has his hand raised.
Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair, still working on this computer stuff, so no, I do not have a question this time.
Okay, Madam Vice Chair, the next question or comment is from Supervisor Bailey.
Ms. Bailey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Dalton, thank you so much for this this wonderful update. I had a meeting with the commander at the base of Quantico on Thursday, and he's very excited about the progression of this project. So we appreciate your presentation and keeping me informed that this has progressed. So thank you very much. And with that, I move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. There's a motion by Ms. Bailey. Is there a second to approve Resolution 9E?
Second, Ms. Baumke.
There's been a motion by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Ms. Baumke. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey.
Aye.
Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Anna Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Baumke.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Franklin.
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Stork.
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. The next item is action item 9F, authorization to execute a contract for construction management services for construction of Quantico Station improvements. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're seeking authorization from the Operations Board to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with Dewberry Engineers Incorporated of Fairfax, Virginia, for construction management services for the station improvement, Quantico Station improvements, in the amount stated in the resolution, plus a contingency for a total amount not to exceed $2,055,654. Madam Vice Chair and others, this is considered somewhat of a companion item to the previous one, 9E. For this type of a project, we require a dedicated construction manager to provide the oversight for the safe implementation of the project in conformity with plans and specifications, including the requirements of CSX Transportation, Amtrak, the Federal Railroad Administration, Marine Corps Base Quantico, the town of Quantico, DRPT, and VRE. That is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any hands raised.
Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9F?
So move, Supervisor Bailey.
Second, Katie Crystal.
There's been a motion by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Ms. Crystal. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Stork, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, this motion has been.
Thank you. The next item is action item 9G, authorization to execute general engineering consulting services contracts for project design and construction management. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're seeking authorization to authorize the CEO to execute contracts with HDR Engineering, Inc., or Incorporated of Vienna, Virginia, for project design services, and STV Incorporated of Fairfax, Virginia, for construction management services for a base period of 1 year and 4 option years in the amount not to exceed $6 million in the aggregate per year, for a total amount not to exceed $30 million in the aggregate for the 5-year term of the contract. The option years may be exercised at the discretion of the CEO. VRE uses general engineering consulting contracts that provide us on-call engineering, planning, environmental, and construction management services. The current general engineering consulting services contract, which would have been number 7, expired at the end of August. This particular GEC contract will have 2 elements, as stated above: project design services and construction management services. The GEC, or the General Engineering Consulting Services contracts, will be task order agreements, and for those task orders in excess of the CEO's delegated authority will be brought back to the Operations Board for approval. I'll just note here too that the contract authorization that we've requested is consistent with the Virginia Public Procurement Act limits for similar professional services contract. So in short, this does not necessarily mean that we will execute contracts totaling $30 million over a 5-year period, but the contract authorization limits requested will permit this if necessary. That is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Do we have anyone with their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Kelly has his hand raised.
Mr. Kelly.
Similar to my last comment, on contracts of this size, don't have problems giving Rich the authority, but if he can let us know before he pulls the trigger, just in case we have any questions. This is more of a speed bump for me, just understanding what's going on and why it's going on. More than anything, this has nothing to do with Rich. I've known Rich for years, and he's dedicated to this operation. I just get a little antsy when a lot of things are whipping across with lots of big figures on it that I'm not aware of until after the fact. So if we can just get a heads up on these projects before they are extended, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Vice Chair, if I may, let me just make this just a point of clarification that with a task order agreement, the individual task orders that that fall within the CEO's spending authority or delegation limit. In this case, task orders that would be valued $200,000 or less in accordance with the delegation of authority could be executed by the CEO, and of course, that information would show up on the monthly spending report. Anything above $200,000, it wouldn't fall within the CEO's delegated authority limits. That would be brought back to the operations board for for approval. So just to clarify, if what Mr. Kelly's asking for is something within that, the $200,000. That's just what you want. You informed on that before that task order agreement.
Madam Chair, really quick, that's yes. You have the authority up to the amounts you just discussed. It's just when we're talking about option years may be exercised at the discretion of the CEO. I don't even want to take that authority away. I just want to know when you're executing it before you execute it. So if I do have a question, I have the opportunity to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Absolutely.
Madam Vice Chair, the next comment or question we have is from Ms. Baumke.
Yes, just being relatively new to the VRE board, just for the record, I'm kind of curious. I see that we're awarding this to HDR Engineering. If you looked back over the historic time of VRE, say over the last 3 to 5 contracts, have they been the winner of this bid, or has this service gone out to other engineering companies?
Madam Vice Chair, the previous 7 contract, it actually had about 13 different elements to it. And I don't recall off the top of my head if HDR was part of that. I think they did have, and I can confirm that for you. But I do know STV did have, did have some elements of that contract. And we've done other work with HDR Engineering off and on through the history of VRE. So we'll see if we can answer your question here real quick.
Madam Vice Chair, we may have another question from Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly?
No question.
Okay, thank you. Madam Vice Chair, we have no further questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9G?
So move, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey, for the motion. Is there a second to approve Resolution 9G?
Vice Mayor Beck.
Bailey, seconded by Mr. Banks. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Yes, this is Supervisor Baumke. I mean, I will support this item, but I just want to know that, these contracts that are being let, that we aren't going to the same engineering company all the time. That makes me nervous, and I just want to make sure that and I'm sure everything has been totally properly bid, et cetera. But I would just like some historical information after the meeting, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bonte.
Madam Vice Chair and Supervisor Bonte, absolutely. We'll get that information to
Has
you
left the meeting.
at the conclusion of this meeting. We have people looking it up right now, but we'll make sure we get it sent out to you.
Madam Vice Chair, this is Supervisor Bailey.
Ms. Bailey?
Pardon me for not being raising my hand, but I would like that information also. Rich, if you could provide that for me as well, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, Supervisor Bailey. Absolutely.
I think, Mr. Dalton, if you could send that to the entire board, that would be helpful. Okay, so I believe we had a motion by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Mr. Banks. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Alcorn,
Has joined the meeting.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bonte,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, that the motion's been approved.
Thank you. The next item is action item 9H, authorization to issue a general planning consulting services task order for the surveying services to support real estate acquisition activities for the Broad Run expansion project. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We're seeking authorization to authorize the CEO to issue a general planning consulting services task order to VHB for surveying services to support real estate acquisition activities for the Broad Run expansion project in the amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency for a total amount not to exceed $520,364. In summary, as just simply as part of our due diligence activities, VRE is at a point with this project, which is approximately or is 30% design level. We need to do some more refined land surveys, other things like locating utilities and easements, and perform some preliminary platting to support real estate acquisitions that are associated with the Broad Run expansion project. And I just want to point out that this is a general planning consulting services contract that we have specifically for surveying services and some other elements as well, not to be confused with the general engineering consulting services contract that we discussed in the previous item. That is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we have a question from Ms. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Rich, is this related to the industrial, park that's right there adjacent to the property and that federal land and county-owned land? We've got a few different neighbors that we need to be sensitive to. Is that one of the reasons that we're going to use this consultant?
That is correct, Supervisor Lawson. As you know, as it relates primarily to the third track component of this project, and of course, to some degree, as we relocate the station platform, yes, there are multiple entities involved. So this is at the point in the project where we really want to get some level of very precision boundaries identified, again, as part of the due diligence before we go and before we go and formally conduct any discussions about land acquisitions. Again, we have had some broad discussions at this point, but this information allows us to more refine those discussions and and again, more refine what that footprint actually looks like.
Right. Okay. And for the commission's, for background to the commission, there are some business owners that will be affected by this project. So just wanted to give you that background. And Rich, I would request that you and your team schedule an appointment with me to bring me up to date on the project. And I'd prefer to do that before the October meeting.
Yes, absolutely. We will schedule a project update briefing through your office, Supervisor Lawson.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Are there anyone else with their hand raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we have no further hands raised.
Move for approval. This is Lawson.
There's been a motion by Ms. Lawson to move approval of Resolution 9H. Is there a second?
Second, Supervisor Bailey.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
Madam Vice Chair, we have none.
Thank you. Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Elton,
Aye.
Ms. Bailey,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork, Mr. Walker,
Aye.
This is Crystal. I didn't hear my name called.
Okay, Ms. Crystal, thank you so much. Madam Vice Chair, that motion has been approved.
Thank you. The next item is action item 9I, authorization to amend the GEC 7 task order for final design services for the Fredericksburg Station Rehabilitation Project. Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Let me just start with this one in order to hopefully minimize any confusion. Previously in action item 9G, we awarded a new GEC contract, or GEC 8. And I stated in there that the current contract, GEC 7, expired at the end of August. But that contract still has some ongoing task order agreements, and consistent with the terms and conditions of that contract, we will continue to use open task order agreements and amend as necessary until that applicable project is completed and those task orders are closed. And so, as you can imagine, we probably only have a couple of those as examples, maybe less than a handful of those remaining. But as you can imagine, this is just simply for continuity of the project. And again, the terms and conditions of those agreements allow for that. We will not award or open any new task orders under GEC 7. Those will be done under the newly awarded GEC 8 contract. 2 items here have to deal with GEC 7. So with that, what we're seeking here for action item 9I is we're seeking authorization for the CEO to amend the current task order for final design services for the Fredericksburg Station Rehabilitation Project, currently executed with STV Incorporated under the GEC 7 contract. And that amendment, as stated in the resolution, plus a contingency that will increase the total authorization of this task order to $468,000 $119. And then just as a quick reminder, this was one of those projects that we reviewed with the entire operations board back in June as part of all of the Fredericksburg line expansion projects. Simply, the scope of work for this project includes rehabilitating the south end of both Track 3 and Track 2 platforms, thus extending them about 125 feet and, of course, making them usable. In addition, an additional access point is proposed at the southeast corner of the station for a safe passenger egress option that does not require crossing Princess Anne Street at grade. Also, concrete spalling, some dental repair work as we identified a couple of months ago at this station, primarily at the station and of course at Charles and Sophia Street structures. And so there is some additional requirements that we want to get incorporated into the design and written into what would eventually be the specification and solicitation for our contractor. Including replacing the existing signage and modifications to parking lot D, which is that egress option that I referred to previously, and some design changes related to BMS and some lighting upgrades. And of course, this will include some permitting services and additional project management support. That is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, Ms. Lawson has her hand raised.
Ms. Lawson.
Sorry, that's a mistake by Ms. Lawson.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Is there anyone else?
Madam Vice Chair, no one else has their hand raised.
Madam Chair, this is
Is there
Matt
a
Kelly,
motion?
Fredericksburg. I'll make the motion to approve asking for the amendment to the current task order for the design services for the Fredericksburg station.
Second by Ms. Domke.
There's been a motion by Mr. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Baumke to approve Resolution 9I. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Madam Vice Chair, we have no questions in the room.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alcorn.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey.
Aye.
Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Baumke.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Franklin.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Stork.
Aye.
Mr. Walken.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, that motion's been approved.
Thank you. The next item is action item 9J, authorization to amend the GEC 7 task order for design services for VRE Suite 202 Phase 2 renovations. Mr. Dalton, please give us an overview of this item.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. First of all, I'll just state that VRE Suite 202, when you visualize this is the VRE headquarters in Alexandria. And so what we're seeking is authorization for the CEO to amend the current task order for design services for Suite 202, and that's the Phase 2 renovations for STV Incorporated under the GEC, or General Engineering Consulting Services Contract number 7, in the amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency. This will increase the total authorization for the task order in an amount not to exceed $151,044. Just in summary, previously we primarily focused on our communications room and associated server room. That's what we called Phase 1, and provided some updates in this space. Phase 2 had originally been envisioned to include areas within VRE's headquarters that included basically the staff kitchen area, other workspaces for the staff, and the reception area. What we've opted to do is move ahead with the reception area and somewhat pause on the rest of the renovations. And when it's more prudent to do those types of renovations, but most specifically this reception area. And for those that have been at the headquarters, if you could just imagine coming in the double glass doors, actually a single glass door. And we have a couple of people right up front, a couple of staff members right up front. There's some workstations up there. What we need to do, and primarily from a safety and security perspective, is we need to push those workstations back, create somewhat of a lobby area on the entrance side of that space, and provide some protection, physical barrier for those staff members in that area. In addition to that, of course, we've all learned on some enhanced health and safety related attributes that we can put in spaces like this. So what we want to be able to do is, of course, move forward with that. And it's more prudent to move forward with that element or that segment of it than it is the other elements. So that's why we need to increase this task order. They can carve out the design, and of course, that's more and prep the specification documents and the associated permitting. So that is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any hands raised.
Thank you. Is there a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9J?
So move, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey, for the motion. Is there a second to approve Resolution 9J?
Alcorn seconds.
There's been a motion by Ms. Bailey, seconded by Mr. Alcorn. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey.
Aye.
Mr. Banks. Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Baumke.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal.
Aye.
Ms. Franklin.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Ms. Shelton.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Stork.
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Madam Vice Chair, this motion has been approved.
Thank you. Mr. Dalton, Spending Authority report.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Just quickly, for the month of July, as depicted on your screen and in your board kit, we had a blanket purchase order that we issued with Fairmont Supply Company to acquire crimpers and hoses for VRE's locomotive fleet. We also issued a task order to STV Incorporated for mechanical engineering consulting services to continue to help us monitor and support positive train control. And then finally, we issued a task order to STV under the mechanical engineering consulting services contract to provide ongoing procurement support for the acquisition of new rail cars. And then in August, we issued a sole source blanket purchase order to Carter Machinery, formerly Alvin Cat, to acquire head-end power filters and thermostats and some other just routine maintenance type items for our head-end power plants, which are part of our locomotives. We also issued a task order to STB Incorporated under the GEC services contract to document the design as it relates to the communications power infrastructure for the security camera system at both of our maintenance and storage facilities. And then finally, issued a blanket purchase order to CDWG to acquire IT hardware and maintenance services on an as-needed basis. That is my summary, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. I think our next information item is an equipment storage update.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We have, we're going to do a short presentation here. And again, going back to the June meeting, we provided an update on the, primarily on the Fredericksburg capacity improvement program or improvement projects as part of the larger Transforming Rail in Virginia project. Specifically, Mr. Kelly asked us to come back at some point in the future and talk about our train storage capacity. So Dallas Richards, who's our chief engineer, and Christine Huffner, who's our manager of project development, they've combined to put this presentation together. And so at this point, I am going to hand over to both Dallas and Christine. And first of all, I will first thank you for hanging in there. I know we've been at this a couple of hours, and I just ask you to, or I thank you for hanging in there, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Rich, Madam Chair, and members of the board. We appreciate your time. In the interest of time, well, there'll be some brevity to this, of course, but offer that, our email addresses there. Feel free to reach out to Christine or I if you wish to have any additional information on what we're offering here today. Slide 40 here. I can't have a railroad presentation without a map. I wanted to show you basically where our storage resides today. The shown in blue on the south ends, if you will, are our overnight storage facilities, Crossroads and Broad Run. On the north, shown in the gray, are our three midday storage facilities, including Ivy City Coach Yard, the future proposed New York Avenue, and LaFont storage tracks, both north and south. That next slide, please. A few takeaways for this slide. I'll be very brief, but I want to show that on the left is existing storage and on the right is our planned capacity. As you look at this, just keep that in mind. Offer that these are all near-term numbers, if you will. So these are within a sort of 10-year forecast and only for projects that are currently funded through this part. The point I think to make with this one is there is plenty of room to grow, including for our partners, DRPT and Amtrak for future service. And we're looking ahead with our partners and in our current revenue service and projections as well. Finally, if you choose to look at this one, take a close look at the notes and assumptions. I think they really help declare some of what's shown in this slide. Next slide, please. Next, I'll speak briefly to the midday storage. Phase 1, this project accommodates near term, as we were talking about, but promotes shared use with Amtrak and includes storage at 4 locations. The ones I just mentioned, they're LaFont North and South, Ivy City Coach Yard, and the proposed New York Avenue facility. It is a proposed 4 stages of construction, the 2 stages in the first phase, which is the very near term, and 2 stages in the phase 2, which is the very long term. With that, I'll just want to quickly step through those phases. So Robert, next slide, please. This would be stage 1 of the coach yard, basically removing a couple of buildings and lengthening the track. Stage 2, please, Robert, next slide. Stage 2 is the New York Avenue, first phase of construction, which is a major footprint, big work here. We've made some changes in the concept to allow 8-car consist, working things here a little differently. But that would give us a significant storage increase on the opposite side of the Northeast corridor and not require crossing the plant on the Amtrak corridor there. Next slide, please. I speak less probably to the phase 2 because it is further out, but includes additional changes at Ivy City Coach Yard as well as further long-term improvements at the New York Avenue yard. Robert, with that. Next slide, please. And here you can see what would be removal of an additional building, reconstruction of a building for the facility, lengthening of additional tracks, which therefore promoting additional storage. I'll make the point that it basically we're looking at the Ivy City facility, at either facility actually, allowing for at least 13 consists, but keeping the number of consists, but increasing the length of trains to allow for those longer consists, 8-car consists as is planned. Next slide, please, Robert. Slide 47. This one shows what would be the future, distant future, if you will, modifications to what would have been built in the stage 2 for New York Avenue, lengthening of the tail track and addition of a turning facility, all of which is in our concept plans, 30% concept plans, all from New York Avenue, but has been broken out into different stages and phases of construction. Next slide, please. And in summary, I just wanted to offer here on slide 48, the what we're looking at the top is for the existing storage and again storage capacity. The bottom making the point that there's room to grow in every shape and form. Looking at these longer consists and more equipment on the plan or in revenue service with additional storage for our partners in the north end. And basically, when I say that, I'm talking about, so we may be using a facility during midday, but Amtrak, for instance, could use this facility overnight or on nights and weekends, for instance. So take a look at those numbers and you can see there's some significant growth in the ability to store equipment. With that, next slide, please, Robert. So this is the Crossroads Yard facility. This is one of our overnight storage facilities. We just had a moment ago board approval on the proposed Lou facility for construction. We're excited for that and moving forward with construction. That is shown here in the blue. That includes a couple of new tracks, tracks 9 and 10 additionally, but shown in red is the planned expansion of the yard. Several tracks that would allow us to store the number of consists at the correct length in the facility. And then a future planned administrative and employee welfare, AEW building, shown in green. Trying to, as we work through this one project, we want to be mindful that to not hamper ourselves in future efforts. And so building out in this consistent fashion basically maximizes the use of the property that we just purchased for the Lou facility project. With that, next slide, please. And there we go. Crossroads Yards, it will accommodate for the forecasted near-term growth. Schedule Lou construction, obviously we talked about a moment ago, but looking at a two-year window from notice to proceed. Once complete, we have to complete the construction of that second phase shown in red prior to delivery of the new equipment that is planned, and then of course the future AEW building. With that, I'll turn it over to Christine.
Thank you and good morning. What you see here now is the Broad Run facility, and the Broad Run expansion project is currently under design. It's being funded by the I-66 outside the Beltway concession fee as well as federal funds. And the focus on expanding the storage capacity is a focus on providing the capacity to store longer trains and additional coaches that are currently under procurement. The storage tracks, the existing storage tracks at the Broad Run complex are being extended railroad north, shown in the orange on this slide, to lengthen them. In order to do that, we're lengthening the tracks and constructing the tracks within part of the existing station parking lot, and also which also requires relocating the station platform further to the railroad north as well in order to complete that storage expansion. The displaced parking and the for the station will be reconstructed on the opposite side of the Norfolk Southern tracks, shown at the top left corner of that slide is the proposed location for the relocated parking. We'll also be expanding parking there as part of this project. And there'll be a pedestrian tunnel constructed to connect underneath the tracks from the new parking to the platform. The storage expansion also includes constructing a new administrative employee welfare or AEW building. We are displacing current AEW facilities as part of the expanding the tracks. So we're reconstructing that facility as well as consolidating employee parking as part of the project within a portion of the existing station parking area. The planning for this near-term expansion, it also considered the future expansion opportunities. And while those aren't funded right now, we have identified locations shown in red on this slide where we could construct further additional tracks for further expansion to accommodate longer-term system growth and storage needs. And if we could go to the next slide, please. As part of this, and as with other VRE storage projects, we're coordinating the improvements with the current coach procurement so that we will have the expanded yard completed in tandem with the delivery of the new equipment. The schedule that we're looking at for completing the Broad Run near-term expansion is looking at an end completion of 2024. We are just completing preliminary engineering. We have real estate acquisition underway, as we discussed with the earlier board item, completing some of the survey work. We have an ongoing procurement for final design that we're getting ready to advertise, and estimate that completion of final design would be in 2020, and then with a construction completion in 2024. And as with the other projects, we're coordinating this project with the Transforming Rail in Virginia service planning and other efforts as we go forward. I believe we have a little bit of time for questions, if you have any, or also you do have my contact and Dallas's contact at the beginning of the slide. Please feel free to forward any questions that may come up later. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both for that presentation. Does anyone have their hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we have a hand raised from Mr. Kelly.
Mr.
Thank you. I actually did mean to raise my hand. First off, I want to thank you for the presentation. We always think about adding new trains and doing new things, but here's the choke point in any plans we have is storage. And it looks like, and I'll follow up with a question on this, it looks like we now have ourselves covered for what we plan to do in the future. I'm going to make the assumption that this also gives us more options in train lengths and other things like that. But also, we've been talking about doing reverse services back and forth coming south as opposed to everything going north. I know that's something a little bit farther into the future, but I'm assuming that this will all accommodate that type of thinking in the future if we want to go ahead and look at the southbound service coming to Fredericksburg maybe on weekends or for events.
Yes, Mr. Kelly, I would offer you, if you think it's hard to park a car in DC, try parking a train, right? And that midday service really does, having backward flow helps reduce the need within DC. And what we have planned in both of our endpoint facilities accommodates not only the equipment we run, and I make this point for Doug and Rob, our guys in the yard there, that they have to have room to move equipment around and service it, right? You have usually 2 or 3 more locomotives than revenue service, and you have several pieces of equipment, cars that are in for service. And so we're making provisions to accommodate all those things at both endpoints and being able to interchange between the locations for servicing as well. So yes, I really think future for number of train sets, number of cars per train, service to those pieces of equipment, and so on. So.
Mr. Kelly, did you have anything further?
No, ma'am, that pretty much answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other hands raised?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any other hands raised.
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
this is actually Supervisor Franklin. My hand is raised.
Ms. Franklin, go ahead.
Just for clarification, the Ivy City location, is that built out yet?
That's that's the facility we use today for primary midday storage. So yes, what's shown here are modifications
To that facility.
to that facility. Yes.
Right. And then the New York Ave location, is that the location right outside of Union Station?
It is adjacent, actually, just across the tracks, if you will, about 200, 300 yards from Ivy City, just on the opposite side of the corridor, between the Northeast Corridor, the Amtrak main line, if you will, and New York Avenue, Route 50.
Okay, so as you're coming into Union Station, that where we see all of the trains sitting idle, is that New York Ave or is that Ivy City?
There is no New York Ave facility today. I'm
Okay.
not sure. Yeah, there's nothing there today. It would have to be cleared and constructed.
So that's just so that where we see the trains idle right outside before you enter into Union Station, that's not an actual storage facility.
No.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Do we have any hands raised or anyone else who would like to ask a question on this item?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any other hands raised.
Okay, and again, I think the contact information is provided in the slides. If you do have questions to follow, you're welcome to follow up with staff after the meeting. Our next item is public comments. The public comment period was extended and remained open through this meeting. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to read into the record any public comments submitted.
Madam Vice Chair, there have been no public comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The agenda circulated did mention a closed session. We do not have a closed session today, so we're moving to Operation Board Members' time. For the sake of efficiency, I might ask, instead of calling the roll, if you could raise your hand if you have something that you would like to share. Do we have any hands that have been raised?
Madam Vice Chair, Ms. Baumke has a comment.
Yes, I don't have a comment. I just need to restate for the record that I did attend the July meeting that we voted on at the beginning. I was thinking it was the August meeting, which we didn't have a meeting. So just for the record, I did attend the July meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baumke. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Madam Vice Chair, we do not have any other hands raised.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I do want to remind everyone that we are scheduled to have a legislative committee meeting following this meeting. The members of that committee, I believe, are Mr. Kelly, myself, Ms. Crystal, Ms. Franklin, and Mr. Walkinshaw. And I believe, staff, could you confirm, are we staying on this link for that meeting?
Yes, we will stay on this meeting.
Okay, and again, anyone is welcome to attend. With that, is there a motion to adjourn the Operations Board meeting?
Alcorn would move to adjourn.
Lawson, second.
Thank you, Mr. Alcorn and Ms. Lawson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Ms. Bailey.
Aye.
Mr. Banks.
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Baumke.
Aye, and I want to let you know that Ms. Shelton's computer died, so you won't get a response from her.
Thank you. Ms. Crystal. Ms. Crystal. Ms. Franklin.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Smith,
Aye. Beals.
Mr. Stork, Mr. Watkins,
Aye.
and Madam Vice Chair, we are adjourned.
Thank you all. We will see you next month.
Dan Stork
has left the meeting.
Ms. Bennett Parker, this is James Walkinshaw.
Yes, Mr. Walkinshaw.
I wanted to let you know, unfortunately, I have to jump off. I have a 12 o'clock meeting, so I hope to participate, but I won't be able to.
Thank you. Certainly understands that, and happy to catch you up later.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Joe Swartz, Chief of Staff here at VRE. I'll be running through the legislative agenda here and basically just looking for comments and any additions that we want to add to either the state or the federal legislative agenda. Let me start by asking Mr. Kelly, as the chairman, do you have any comments starting off?
No, Joe, go right ahead and walk through it, and I might comment after we get through.
A participant has joined the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. So obviously, there's going to be a major focus on how to deal with the impacts of the coronavirus on transit agencies in the next legislative session, both how to deal with getting transit agencies back on their feet, how do they continue to operate, and of course on the funding side. While we don't have we won't be having a particular ask, or at least I did not put anything as a particular ask on that. We'll be very diligent to make sure that we're paying attention to anything that's proposed and make sure we understand how that would affect us. As things are proposed, we'll make sure to come back, in particular, this committee, and let them know what we think our position on this should be. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has a specific question about pandemic response type legislation.
This is Supervisor Franklin from Prince William County. I think from my perspective, we have a couple of VRE trains that run through my district and several that run through the county, as you know. So the Long Bridge extension is going to be something that I continue to watch closely. So thank you for adding that to here, and whatever updates you have to that. I know we've gotten some good news over the past month with regards to updates to that, but that's something that we'll be paying close attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be another focus clearly for the state, DRPT, and then ultimately the Rail Passenger Authority as it comes online. A lot of discussion of the Long Bridge. What we're going to see them continue to work on is a funding plan for projects beyond the Long Bridge. There are other projects involved, of course, in the Transforming Rail in Virginia plan. And as those go forward, as of right now, there's a plan to have us contribute part of our CROC funding for the Long Bridge, and we will continue to work with DRPT and the Rail Authority as they sort of shore up the plan for the entire program.
Hey, Joe, this is Mike
Yes.
McLaughlin, DRPT. I believe that was Ms. Franklin that commented previously. On that note, I think you and Rich are aware there is actually legislation we have pending before Congress that would allow Long Bridge to be have land transferred to Virginia to construct the Long Bridge project from the Department of Interior and National Park Service. So I know Rich has mentioned that in his weekly report. So that is something we need. We have not faced much opposition. The only problem is that Congress is so stalemated. I'm trying to be diplomatic. And not many bills are moving. But we actually did have, the provision was inserted in the House Interior Appropriations bills. Unfortunately, the Senate just hasn't moved yet. So, so we've been working with the delegation and things have been going well, but just wanted to raise that and let folks know that at some point we might come to you all to ask for some support on that. But so far, because it hasn't had much opposition, things have been going well, but we might tap into the expertise of the board and VRE if need be.
Yeah, and this is Supervisor Franklin. I don't want to dominate the discussion, but with regards to that legislation, is it a funding piece? And if so, I'm wondering if it's possible to try and add it to the CR.
It's not a funding piece.
Okay.
It's just a authorization. And there's a quirk in federal law, and I know you have legislative experience too. I also worked in the Hill for a dozen years. There's a quirk in federal law from the 1800s that doesn't allow railroads to be built in federal parklands. But we've raised this with MPS and others, and they're supportive as well. It's not a funding piece. There might be a funding piece one day, but this is just a permission to use NPS land. It's not much. It's about 4 acres of NPS land to construct Long Bridge, and we've been working with the district as well. And there's bipartisan sponsorship, not only from Virginia, but Representative Norton, also Representative Brown. The senators from Maryland are interested in this. But no funding piece, and we have explored CR opportunities, although we've been told by the Senate office they're trying to keep those clean. So we're going to keep trying every opportunity. Suspension of the rules possible in the House and the hotline in the Senate. And I'm sorry, I'm getting into
A
legislation.
participant has joined the meeting.
But those are possibilities as well. It was marked up out of the House Natural Resources.
Has left the meeting.
That's great. Thank you.
This is Matt Kelly, Fredericksburg. And first, let me apologize. I'm just coming back from vacation. Actually, technically, I'm still on vacation and meant to go back. Joe, we had some issues in our last legislative agenda about possible changes, I think at the federal and or state level. Could you just give me a quick heads up on how we fared on what we requested or what we were concerned about last year coming into this year?
Has left the meeting.
Yeah, most of what we had last year continues on. We certainly we were keeping an eye on issues having to do with on-time performance for Amtrak. They are working with the STB or through the STB to set up a way to have their on-time performance reported. They're working with the FRA on that, and our concern for that is how are they going to measure that, and if the way that they measure it could possibly impact the way that the freight rails dispatch or look at the commuter rail services that run on their tracks as well. The point of this is we don't want the freight rails to basically move the commuter rails off to the side to let Amtrak so that their on-time performance is good and not care about our on-time performance because there's nothing in federal law that says anybody has to care about our on-time performance. So we continue to take a look at that. The other big issue that continues, we're keeping an eye on, has to do with a case in Chicago with Metra and their Union Station. Amtrak was, as they're renegotiating their contract with Metra, they were sort of trying to take control of Union Station and
an offshoot of that would be that they wouldn't necessarily, or Metro would not necessarily have the ability to go to the Surface Transportation Board if contract negotiations weren't going well. And our concern is if that happened, that the same thing could happen in Union Station in DC and affect us. So we're keeping an eye on that. It's a court case right now, but we believe things are starting to work out as we'd hope they would.
Kind of follow up on that, and you do note it in here in the draft. Again, Joe, as you know, one of the reasons I started screaming and yelling about the legislative agenda is we got very passive, and I fully, using support, try to ask, things of that nature, as opposed to being a little bit more specific. Though I fully understand right now, trying to be specific about anything is with COVID and everything that's going on is kind of difficult. But in some of this, could we be a little bit more specific? Because you do mention the on-time issue with Amtrak, but just say monitoring it. And I think we need to put in, we're monitoring it to make sure it does not negatively impact on our operations, or something a little bit more specific on what exactly we're trying to get to. And a follow-up question to that would be, you all are in a better position to see some of this than we are, and I'll ask Mike too to chime in on DRPT side. Is there anything specific we should be looking at or seeing coming at us, like these issues, that can be an issue in the next few years?
Matt, this is Mike. Since you mentioned my name, happy to jump in. I can tell you this is something we work actively with Amtrak on. And in fact, as part of Transform Rail in Virginia, there'll be additions to VRE and Amtrak service. And we are trying to work with Amtrak on a service optimization plan. And Rich has been very involved in this as well, that will treat all passenger trains fairly. As an example, this is just one example, if a train is late coming into the corridor, rather than just send that train out and have it be late and have it mess up 3 more trains and have that domino effect that Rich has talked about at VRE board, we would ask that train, if it's substantially late, be held for a ghost slot, if you will, so the other trains can get out on time. We don't want a train that's 2 hours late coming from the Northeast Corridor and scheduled to go to Norfolk or Richmond or Roanoke to just keep barreling through at 2 hours late, messing up VRE trains. So that's something we're working through. However, do keep in mind Amtrak has a statutory authority, which I think Joe alluded to. So we're still dealing with that as well. But we're trying to work with them as part of the larger deal and trying to reset schedules to make sure there's proper coordination and harmonization amongst all the passenger and freight trains.
Joe, this is Matt. Do you have anything to add to that? Again, I'm just trying to make sure we're covering all our bases, that there's not an issue that you see coming out of either, or let's talk the feds right now, that could potentially have an impact on us that's not covered on here now.
Yeah, there's nothing that's on here now I'm aware of or federal relations folks that we see, but we'll keep an eye on how things evolve if and when things start to break loose at the federal level. But I take your point about maybe we could rewrite something more pointed. So I'll do a little this and add a more specific ask or more specific requirement of what we'll be doing, and then I can send these back out to the committee by the end of next week.
Thank you.
item on here has to do with the liability insurance. VRE in particular this year had, we were surprised at how expensive our liability insurance was. And in fact, we found it very difficult to even get the amount of liability insurance that we needed. It came down very much to the last minute for us to get that. That is not, first of all, that had nothing to do with VRE. That has to do with the insurance market right now. And VRE was not alone in that. It was sort of nationwide. All the commuter railroads and other industries are finding the same thing. So we'll be working with all of the stakeholders on seeing if there's a better way to go about covering our liability insurance. And then finally, of course, we're keeping an eye on the surface transportation reauthorization. That is part of the logjam that Mike mentioned up on Capitol Hill. We're not sure that's going to move anywhere. It's very likely that's going to be a continuing resolution, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. Are there any other issues that anyone would like to bring up, would like to see on the agenda?
This is Elizabeth Bennett Parker. Can you hear me?
We can.
A participant has left the meeting.
Sorry, thank you. I had it has announced that I had left earlier. I had switched devices, but didn't seem like I was able to speak via my phone. I had one issue. Oh, we're only on federal. Never mind. My issue is state. So I guess I should hold that.
That's fine. We can talk about either one.
So one thing that I'm interested in is electronic participation. I think it's been very helpful as a regional body to be able to meet electronically or to have individual members participate electronically as well. And I think obviously we've been given expanded opportunity to do so right now. But I think generally current law or pre-existing law only allows individual members of public bodies to participate electronically 2 times per calendar year, and would certainly be interested in increased flexibility for public bodies like ourselves to make policies regarding electronic participation that are accommodating of our members' needs while also remaining open and transparent to the public.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll coordinate with Steve McIsaac. He's certainly way more familiar with the current laws than I am, and we'll put together an additional item to add to the list here.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yes.
This is Mike again from PRPT. There's an amendment, I believe now in front of the legislative session that would allow some flexibility of transportation funds to be given to various transportation entities in the state. That'll help our Rail in Virginia, for instance. So that's something I'm happy to send you more information on. You might already be aware, or I'm sure Amy is, but I think that'd be helpful if VRE could support that as well, and the commissions.
Sure, absolutely. And you're talking about the legislation that's going on right now during the special session, correct?
Correct. But it's something that, especially with COVID, I wouldn't be surprised to see something of that nature continue on again until the next year's session.
Right. So absolutely, we would keep an eye on that and would support that. We know there's going to be a lot of sort of moving around and doing the best to do as little harm as possible, given the lack of revenue, and we will support DRPT's position on that.
Hey, Joe, this is Alex Thorpe, and Amy is on also, but we've supported that, and she's talked with some of the members of the money committees about it already. So
here, I'll report that back. Thanks, Alex.
Joe, thanks for putting in the Transportation Authority's proposal. I'm assuming that is pointed towards us to the south.
Absolutely.
It could be an uphill battle, but thank you for putting it on there.
And Joe, one more thing. It's not legislative right now because it's already been created, but the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some tweaks. In fact, there's a tweak being requested at the General Assembly now to allow DRPT to continue doing activities related to VPRA. That's what we're calling the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. Because it was supposed to start July 1st. It's just taken a while to get the board members named. So I'm not saying you need to add to the legislative agenda, but as with any new authority, after it starts, you might realize there need to be some changes. So just kind of want to put that on everyone's radar, that actually should be starting soon. And VRE will be an ex officio member of that board. So Rich will be, along with Jennifer Mitchell, will be a ex officio members of that board.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Yeah, we saw that. What Mike is talking about is basically there's legislation that says DRPT will be the staff of the rail authority until they're able to hire a staff. So, and I know that's working its way through the general special session now.
You already said that earlier. My apologies. You might have heard the crank in the background. I had to walk away for a couple of minutes.
No problem. Any other questions or comments?
One last one. This is Matt. From what Mike just said, is that something we need to have on our legislative agenda, at least continue to monitor? I'm looking at here, pandemic capital funding, the NVTA, we got a Virginia Transit Association and Public Transit and Create Program, Transportation Authority. Do we want to put the new authority on the list of monitoring? As it, again, to Mike's point, this is going to be an organization that's probably going to go through some growing pains. We need to stay on top of that.
I certainly do that. From my perspective, that's sort of what the state funding line was about, the transforming rail in Virginia, which is what the rail authority is going to be put in place to do. But I can be more specific about us keeping an eye on the creation of the organization itself and the policies that go behind that.
And Madam Vice Chair, this is Supervisor Franklin again. Just very quickly, we've heard a lot of discussions about hazard pay on both the federal and state level. If you can just generally, just briefly kind of go over what those discussions have been like. And I'm particularly curious to see if that's something we can advocate for our workforce. It's something that, some of our PRTC bus operators, bus drivers are certainly interested in, and I can only imagine that maybe VRE employees who are operating the trains may or may not be interested in, but I'm just curious as to what the discussion has been.
Well, I can tell you, I have not had any discussions with anybody about hazard pay, whether it be specific to VRE or just in general on the transit side. I'm looking at Rich. Has there been any request from Keolis?
There's absolutely been no request. And so, yeah, from a hazard pay standpoint, obviously the folks that are out there operating trains, conductors, engineers and stuff, frankly, and this is, I'll just say somewhat anecdotal and not maybe official positions from represented members and stuff. They're just thankful to still have a job. So they haven't asked for it. And I think the other piece of that is we've incorporated some very liberal leave policies such that, if they feel sick, folks feel sick and they need to stay home, just make sure that, that if it's just the sniffles or it's something other than that, we have been, and I say that's a collective we, us and our contract service providers, we have just given them that latitude. So again, it hasn't come up, and I think primarily because, we're taking care of some of that on the front end But that doesn't mean that it won't come up. So, and I keep my ear to the ground as it relates to at least the, the collective bargaining units for the, for the rail operators. So, if that's helpful.
Yep. Thanks for that.
Hi, this is Bennett Resnick. I serve as one of the advisors to VRE on the federal level, and the House had passed the HEROES Act bill, which does provide something called the COVID-19 HEROES Fund, and essentially it's a pandemic pay premium. So there's a $25,000 pandemic premium pay increase for certain essential frontline workers, which is sort of equivalent to a raise of about $13 per hour from the start of the disaster declaration, and that would be until the end of the year, December 31st. But we're not sure where things are going in terms of the next relief package, but there is a pandemic premium pay within the House passed bill.
So that's definitely an item we'll keep an eye on, and if it looks like that's going anywhere, we'll update the board on how that would impact us.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then Chair Kelly, I will kick it to you if you want to adjourn the meeting.
I just want to thank everyone for participating. This is actually a very important thing we do. A few years back, really started focusing on our legislative agenda. And Joe, you've always done a great job for us. I want to thank you for what you've done and everybody's participation. And we look forward to seeing the final draft coming before the board. If nobody has anything else, we'll call it quits. Everybody have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A participant has left the meeting.